Fanatics acquired Topps, so what's going to happen next to the value of Panini cards in the future? I've got some theories. Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Data Dive. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot. By now, I'm sure you have seen the earth-shattering news. Fanatics has acquired Topps. My Instagram feed and stories were 95% about this topic for several days when the news dropped a few weeks back. Everyone is ecstatic about the prospect of Topps Chrome and Topps Finest basketball and football making a comeback. Not to mention the possibility of other awesome high-end products like Topps Dynasty. Now, while this is an almost universally welcomed announcement, there's also some concern swirling about what this means for Panini. Not only what it means for them in the future, as in, will Fanatics acquire Panini? But also, assuming they don't, what does this mean for Panini-era basketball and football cards? Can they still be good investments? Will people forget about Panini over time? What about the cards main between now and 2026 when Fanatics takes over? In order to theorize about this, I think it's important to consider some history and some supporting data. So let's take a look. All right, before we get into some actual data, I want to look at a concept that's really important. It's one many of you I'm sure are familiar with, but scarcity. Scarcity, according to Investopedia, refers to a basic economics problem, the gap between limited resources and theoretically limitless wants. So what scarcity is really the intersection between rarity, how many of something there is, and demand, how much do people actually want it. You can have an item obviously that's extremely rare, but people don't want anything to do with it. So we have to consider scarcity when we're thinking about the value of cards now and over time. Now, when we think about scarcity, in terms of rarity, there's actual rarity. This would be something like low print runs from the manufacturer or low variety, which I've highlighted in yellow here because that's one of the topics that I want to talk about today. That's really what I want to focus on. Low variety, meaning not too many different variations, not too many different sets. In order for something to have value, investors, consumers, collectors need to be aware that it exists, and they need to all have eyes on that specific thing in order to drive up demand. So there's another kind of rarity, what we might call fabricated rarity. This has to do with cards that are low in population count, low PSA 10 count. This is kind of due to print quality and era. Obviously, when we look back at vintage, whether it's Jordan's rookie or other older cards, there's much lower copies in terms of pop count of PSA 10s, BGS 9.5, BGS 10, SGC 10, etc. So that's what we might call fabricated rarity, when the card itself might be high in print run, or there might be low variety in terms of the number of cards, but there's still very few of the highest quality of the card. Now, when we think about demand, there's two kinds. There's really short-term and long-term demand, what we might call variable demand. This has to do with a player or a set being hyped up, good or poor performance for that player, big news, trade rumors, winning awards, or just an influx, a temporary influx potentially of the number of people in the sports card market. And then we can think about sustainable demand, long-term demand. This is for players who have obviously proven greatness, an established proven legacy, time-tested designs for cards, loved by all, things like PMGs that we've talked about in the past, something that's really iconic. That's going to create a sustainable demand over time. So really important concept here. And like I said, I want to get into this variety piece, the variety of cards over time. So what I've done here is I've gone to Trading Card Database, tcdb.com, and I looked at numbers specific to basketball cards. So I pulled the basketball data and I looked at the number of sets over time, starting in 1980, and we're going to go all the way up until our present time. So this chart goes from 1980 to 1992. And when I say a set, what I'm talking about, according to Trading Card Database, is a specific, almost like a variation, what we describe as a variation in market movers. So a black 1 of 1 is going to be different than a gold to 10 is going to be different than a silver and a base. Those are each considered sets in Trading Card Database's data. And obviously something like an insert set and the corresponding parallels would also be distinct sets for this data. So that's how they define it. So let's talk about this. Starting in 1980, just 15 distinct sets, so 15 different variations in 1980 for basketball cards. That's it, 15. And we flash forward to 1992, which is when the insert boom was born, when it started to happen, when Topps and Fleer and Upper Deck started, printing inserts, we end up all the way up to 246 different sets. So from 1980 to 1992, significant increase, obviously, in the number of sets. But if we flash forward from 92 to 2002, then what we see is another big jump. We saw a high point in 1999 at 620 different sets, and then it kind of tapers off at 556 in 2002, right before the massive draft class with LeBron, Carmelo, Wade, Bosh, and others. So we go from 246 to upwards of 550, 600, and then we go to 2003. So we start this chart at 2002, 2003 up to 828, and we see a high point in 2007 of 1,148 sets. So you're seeing this increase over time. And this is really important because, again, this has everything to do with, how are my eyes focusing on specific sets, on those products, and then on the different variations within those products, those different parallels and inserts. A lot of people, if their attention is spread too thinly, they only have so much capacity to understand different products, different sets, and that's why we see this big fixation, even today, on specific variations where other ones might be just as rare, but there's not as much attention on them because there's too many variations. So let's keep going. Of note, obviously really important, this 252 has everything to do with Panini basically taking over and not getting going yet on cards. That's why we see only 252 different sets in 2011. So we go from 2009 all the way up to our present time, and this is crazy. This is where you look at the numbers and you think back to where this chart started. We started at 1,135 sets in 2009. When Panini really took over and started to print in 2012, they basically matched that at 1,149. And then we see a big jump of 50% in 2016, all the way up to 1,859 sets. And in 2020, 3,431 different sets, different variations and different inserts of cards for basketball cards. So from 15, back in 1980, 15, all the way up to over 3,000 in 2020. This makes it really difficult, especially if you're a casual investor, a casual collector, to even know all of the cards that are in existence. Borderline impossible. Even for people on our team where we're spending our time in this data every day, we're building up market movers in the database and we're studying new product checklists. There are still inserts we come across and we go, wow, I didn't even know that existed. I've never seen that before. So this chart really tells a very compelling picture. And I think it's really important to think about then this progress over time and how we might kind of label these different eras and how things evolve. So that's exactly what I want to do. So if I look at this period from 1980 to 1991, this is what many people refer to as the junk wax era. It was all about the base. There weren't really inserts. There were very few variations. This was kind of the same cards printed over and over again, and the only real rarity here is that fabricated rarity in terms of high grade cards, PSA 10s and other high grades from that era. Then we go into what I like to call the golden era. This is my favorite era of collecting. This was my childhood. And this was the advent of inserts and parallels. This is what really changed the game and kind of set the table for where we are today in terms of the creativity with cards and the variety and variations. We move on from 2003 until about 2011. I call this maybe the forgotten era. There were still many collectors, but many also fell out of the hobby. The spotlight kind of came off. A lot of the people who collected when they were younger, whether that was the 80s or the 90s, they kind of grew up, they had other priorities, they were going to college, they were focusing on other things in their lives and starting their careers. And I hear that story from a lot of people. That's certainly true for what happened to me in this period. And then we get to 2012, all the way up to like 2016, the first half of the Panini era with basketball cards. And I would call this Panini's struggle. This is when they were really trying to prove, like, did we make a good investment here? This makes sense for us to buy these licensing rights. There were fewer collectors and the products were a lot cheaper then. You hear stories about Prism Hobby going for like 50 bucks a box. So obviously that's really, really changed. And then we get into the second half, and this is the sports card explosion, the Panini explosion. This was a huge renaissance. You have a lot of old collectors who returned to the sports card hobby, and you had a lot of new people entering. So this is how I would kind of break up these eras. But I also want to look at this another way. I want to look at this a little bit differently. Same chart, and one thing of note here, I would call these last 2 years what a lot of people label as the junk slab era because of how many cards were sent off for grading and now are flooding the marketplace. You could also call this the junk variation era. So many different variations. We saw these numbers just spike like crazy that it makes it really hard. A lot of these products become very watered down, and there's a lot of discontinuity, honestly, from one product to the next in terms of how the variations are set up from one set to another. So let's look at this a different way, and let's kind of label what happened with variety and print runs, with rarity in this period. So from 1980 to 1991, very low variety, and excessive print runs. They were just printing these over and over again. We hear stories about how they had one set of print runs and then there was more demand for the cards, so they just print more. That's kind of the low variety, excessive print run. In that golden era, I would say healthy variety, pretty healthy variety. The numbers are good, a lot of creativity. Pack odds were published on the different products. You kind of knew what you were going for and what the chase cards were, but still high print runs, I would say. They were obviously opening up the printing presses and still printing a lot of product in that era, and that's somewhat what led to the demise for a number of years, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s. Then we go into that era of the forgotten era, high variety. So I would go from healthy to maybe slightly too high a variety, and healthier print runs. If you go and look at pop counts, if you try to look for some of these cards from this era, they're hard to find. There weren't as many being printed because the demand wasn't there, because a lot of collectors fell out of the hobby during that period. Moving into Panini's first half, healthy variety, I would say. And you might ask, well, how could that be healthy, but then you have high variety in the previous period? I think we've set a different precedent. I think that actually, people were kind of starting to come back into this, and especially setting the table for now, almost hindsight is 2020. Now I would call it healthy variety based on the demand that we have today. And lower print runs. Again, very difficult to find some of these cards. The print runs overall were lower, and you obviously didn't have as many variations. And now we get into this era, this last 4 years, especially the last 2 years, excessive variety and excessive print runs in 2019 and 2020. And that is extremely concerning to me. That has a huge impact on demand overall. Not just the quality of the players, not just those rookie classes, which have been pretty strong so far in 2019 and 2020, but the number of cards printed and the overall variety makes it really hard to know what to focus on and what's going to stick over time. So that's something that I wanted to present. Now, another really important thing to display here, if we were to continue on this trajectory and we were to go from 2021 up through 2025, just before Fanatics officially takes over the NBA licenses, this is what it would look like in terms of the number of sets based on the growth we've seen in the last 4 years. We would potentially end up with 13,000 different sets, different variations in Panini basketball based on this growth trajectory. Now, do I think this is gonna happen? I really don't. I think they're more likely to continue high print runs than to continue to have 1 million variations. I think we've probably actually plateaued, and certainly I couldn't really imagine a scenario where we have maybe more than 5,000 different variations, but this is just kind of to demonstrate what has happened over time and how really concerning that would be if we continued on this trajectory. Another thing that we can look at here, and this is really valuable, the number of cards by player. So if you're thinking of collecting or investing a specific player, it is not enough to go, wow, I think he's got a great future. I think he's got a really bright future. That's not enough, because some of these guys are going to have so many cards that it's just not comparing apples to apples to look at, how does Zion compare to Kobe Bryant? Or how does Kobe compare to Michael Jordan? So let's take a look at those numbers. This is the number of cards by player in existence over time. Again, still using trading card database information. We have Gary Payton, just as an example, obviously 1991 rookie, a guy who was coming at the tail end of that junk wax era into that golden era. And he's just under 5,000 total cards in existence all the way up until now. And that includes Panini era cards, printing him after he was out of the league. Michael Jordan, just under 15,000. Kobe, a little over 15,000. LeBron, right around MJ, a little under him, under 15,000. And then we get to Giannis, Luka, and Zion. So you would look at this and you go, well, this kind of makes sense to me. Obviously you'd expect those three guys, Jordan, Kobe, LeBron, to have the most cards, and that does make sense. But this doesn't tell the full story. It's not just about how many cards there are per player. It's about how many cards there are per season played in history. And this is the number of active seasons they played. So again, little bit of a, kind of data skew here because we do have more Gary Payton, we do have more Kobe cards still being printed even after they're out of the league. Jordan, obviously, not so much because Upper Deck still holds those licenses. But look at the number of cards per season played and look at Zion Williamson. He's the highest. In 2 years, he's got the most cards per season printed, and I think that's really concerning. I think if you look at a guy like Zion who's completely unproven, even obviously more so than a guy like Luka who's sort of just behind him, it's really concerning to say, wow, there's a lot of cards out there already. There's a lot of rookie cards out there already, and this guy hasn't even proven anything yet. What's going to happen to the value of those cards over time? So let's look at those and let's look at rookie cards by player, and this is the one that really stands out to me. If you're thinking of investing in a player, the first thing you're going to look at are rookie cards, usually PSA 10 rookie cards or BGS 9.5 rookie cards. That's where your eyes go to focus. We've even seen people in the recent years talking about second-year cards, Luka's second-year cards, Zion's second-year cards. I wouldn't be looking those at all, personally, in terms of investments at least, because there's already way too many rookie cards. Gary Payton has 10 total rookie cards. That's it, 10 different rookie cards. Kobe has 101. LeBron has 486 different rookie cards. Now this is again talking about variations. So a gold from a red or something like that would be considered different rookie cards, different variations. Giannis drops down to fewer than that. We go up to Luka, and then kind of ironically, I don't think this was by design, Zion, whose rookie year is 2019, has 2019 different rookie cards. 2019 rookie cards. So when you see these people and they pull, a Zion to 25 out of Hoops or Hoops Premium, you're thinking, man, that's a big hit. That's a rare hit. There's only 25 of those. It's really not that rare if you line it up with all the parallels across all the sets and think about how many numbered to 25s, numbered to 20s, numbered to 15s, numbered to 10s. They add up and the rarity actually isn't as profound as you might think there is. So this is really important information to look at when we're thinking about investing in cards. How many are in existence, how many variations and how much variety is there? Because over time, collectors can only invest, or think about so much. And then they're gonna be moving on to new products and sort of losing the attention on those older sets. So let's kind of think about that and unpack that a little bit more. What does this mean for Panini Cards, past, present, and future? I believe that there's going to be sort of a proverbial sorting of the wheat from the chaff. Now, in fact, in many ways, this has already started to happen with the massive price declines in commodity cards like base cards in the past few years. In contrast, many shorter printed cards and certain case hit inserts have continued to rise and increase in price. So I often compare 1996 basketball cards to 2018 basketball cards. It's when a lot of people really started collecting in each respective era. There were two really incredible rookie classes, and you had some amazing inserts born at those times. But a big difference between those 2 years is that the years leading up to 96, let's say 92 through 95, those weren't terribly remarkable in terms of the inserts and parallels. Yes, there were some amazing ones, but this is when the manufacturers were still really cutting their teeth in terms of creativity and innovation. In contrast, Panini Cards from 2016 or 2012 to 2016 were actually pretty remarkable, and many of them are much lower print runs, far fewer overall cards from those years than in more recent years. Many of Panini's best inserts, in fact, and best base designs are from those early years. The jerseys and the patches were largely game worn, the autographs were more often on card autos, and there were fewer of them in general. And the parallels, if you've seen 2012, 2013 Prism, they really popped in terms of color and refraction. So what does that mean? I see those years, 2012 to 2016, being Panini's golden era, when the demand, sort of independent of player, will still remain pretty sustainable over time. That's when the number of variations was much lower. In contrast, I think that the demand for cards in every year since 2017 will largely wane over time, outside of the most iconic variations and the absolute best players from those eras. So I'm talking about the more iconic one-of-ones like Black, Nebula, Gold Vinyl, as well as gold parallels from key sets like Prism, Optic, and Select, and then popular case hits obviously like Color Blast, Kaboom, Downtown, blank slate. These should retain popularity as the best cards of the second half of the Panini era. But as for the cards yet to come, I have no clue. It's all going to depend on the number of products and variations, as well as print runs. But personally, I'd be very wary. I'd really like to see these final years of Panini production being comparable to the 1999 to 2002 era of cards. There were some great designs, but the demand for those cards absolutely pales in comparison to the demand for the cards from 96 to 98. So, what do you think is going to happen with Panini Cards? Will Fanatics acquire them too? Will they all go up or down over time? Let me know down in the comments. And if you really like basketball cards, make sure that you subscribe to Basketball Card Fanatic magazine. This is quite literally a must-read for anyone passionate about basketball cards. Visit bcfmag.com and use the code SCI50 to get 50% off your first issue. Just make sure that you order by Sunday, January 23rd to get this month's hard copy. And if you like data and you want to research the price of these cards over time, make sure to visit marketmoversapp.com. Market Movers has the largest collection of vetted sports cards available. We're now tracking roughly 375,000 different cards. See which plan is right for you. Thanks a lot for watching, and until next time, happy investing.